There you go.
Hey traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you from closingprint.com on Sunday, July 26th. In this video we're going to cover the indices. We saw very weak performance on the industrials, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq 100, and of course the Russell finishing off the worst of all, minus 3.24%. Volatility, we started the week below 12, hit a high of 14.73 and finished at 13.74. So we have a ways to go to get to an extreme level that we could fade again, which would be around 20. Breath, the NYSE gave us a bearish cross on Wednesday, and the NIAD is at an extreme. We're due for an inflection at that point. Catalyst, 9 of 12 sectors are oversold. Seasonality, the last week of July usually finishes up 68% of the time. In addition, we see the CPC put-call ratio hit an extreme level Friday with a close at plus 1.41. Currencies, US dollar moved a little lower from the 98.31 high during the week down to 97.35 at the close. Bonds continue to be strong, TLT, with the 200 MA overhead at 123.19. Commodities see weakness. Hedge funds are net short gold. There was an article out that I may post later that was very interesting. That could be a catalyst for a move higher if we see short covering. Sentiment, bullish 32.5%, neutral we have 41.9%, and bearish traders we see 25.6%. And then we'll look at setups, the 10 Easto MACD setup, and we'll post some charts on the blog later tonight and also prior to the opening trade on Monday. Okay, so let's look at the indices for a moment. The Spider ETF, we were anticipating a triple top the end of last week. We got that doji that we were looking for. So that's 3 candle pattern. It wasn't perfect for an evening star doji being a spinning top, but we did start to move lower. Many of the bulls that were celebrating on Friday, I imagine, got caught unless they got out of their trade. We dropped below the volume by price bar noted, as well as the 10 EMA and the 50. Slow Stow is now in the green zone, and MACD we're looking for a little bounce this week as we might retest this trend line that we broke, the volume by price and the 50-period moving average. Shifting gears and taking a look at the Nasdaq 100, didn't do as well. We had a really huge bar on Friday. We have this volume by price and previous breakout level that we're at now, where we could see a bounce. Note the distribution volume. MACD turning hard after a huge up week, and Slow Stow near the green zone. And the number of stocks trading above the 50-period moving average were at 45%. That could change, move higher. It could also move lower. So we'll be looking for catalysts for a move lower down to a test of the 50-period moving average perhaps. Here's the Nasdaq Composite Index. Note we're right at the 50-period moving average, and we saw up-down volume favoring the bears 3-1. Taking a look at the Russell 2000, small caps got beat up last week as well. Towards the end of the week previous, we moved sideways and then set up this move lower. Note we're at a double bottom, 1,225.98. We have this level here as well, a little bit lower, 1,225.47, and then 1,221.41 that we saw back in late December. We have multiple areas that we could see a bounce, so it's looking like we could see some buyers step in this week. We'll watch for that. Note Slow Stow is in the green zone and MACD is below the zero line, so we need to see that move back up if we want to trade small caps. And last, of course, we want to look at the NYSE Composite Index of 2,000 stocks. we have this megaphone shaped pattern below all of the moving averages. We have these previous lows where we could see buyers step in. High low is turning back down now. Remember, we were pointing out that discrepancy or contradictory indicator last week. So keep an eye on NYA. Okay, let's turn our attention to some of our indicators. VIX gave us two really good trades over the last 3 weeks. Starting in July, on the 9th, we got this spike higher. We had a nice default trade, hit this area above 20. Then over the next 2 weeks, we came down and formed a low that we hadn't seen since December. We pointed that out. We were long the puts. That gave us a nice trade into Friday. And currently we are watching for a possibility of this moving higher. We are near levels that we've seen buyers step in before, so just keep an eye on these levels for the possibility of a bounce this week. The Vixen for the Nasdaq has a very similar look. We had that peak, the fall below previous lows, and now we're at a close right around 1585. Consulting the NAMO for the Nasdaq McClellan oscillator, we hit an extreme greater than what we saw on the NYSE, which we'll look at in a second. We saw that red bar on Elder Impulse on Friday, and of course NASI continues to move lower. The same for the NYMO. We have an extreme level. We could always see moves further lower, and we're watching NYSE as well, the summation index. So there is a possibility we could see a bounce. There's also the equal possibility we'll see more weakness early in the week before we see an inflection point. So we'll be watching this intraday for any indication that we may be changing character. Looking at a chart of the bullish percent index, we haven't seen these lows for quite some time. This was the October Ebola scare. I don't think we're in that kind of category right now. We're at the lower Bollinger Band. We are oversold. So we could see bullish percent pick up a little bit the last week of July. Note, however, bullish percents for AAII sentiment survey of American Institution of Individual Investors. These are the results. So we could see some of these neutral go into either the bear or the bullish camp. So keep an eye on this week. Of course, the put-call ratio has helped us out a lot recently as well. With these extremes, we've traded in both directions. We're at another extreme, 1.41. We're at 1.45 at the beginning of July when we saw this move off of the lows. We're pretty close to that level right now that we saw back in March as well. Similar move, not quite as high, so you can see what this extreme can do for us in terms of an inflection point. Here is a neat little chart that we put together. We have the S&P 500, previous lows, and extreme levels on the NYAD. Okay, this is a 5-period moving average of the advanced decline. The actual advanced decline is invisible, so what you're seeing is a 5-period trailing moving average. When we see these extremes, you can follow those up and you can see what happened previously at the green bars. We saw an inflection point soon thereafter. And here is yet another look at the same information, the New York advanced decline. Note, this is John Murphy's chart. We stole this idea, pretty good chart to have. The New York advanced decline cumulative and the S&P 500. Note that it paralleled most of the time during 2014 and the first half of 2015. We made this triple top and we've since been moving lower into this. I drew in a channel. Perhaps we can see a low here and a move back up and a commensurate bounce in the S&P 500. Reflecting on the US dollar for a moment and how it will affect all of the commodities that we'll cover in a few minutes, we can see that we moved off of the 98.31 level and we're holding right at the 10-period EMA. We closed at 97.35. So we're just off slightly less than a buck, and we'll watch for a direction on the US dollar this week. And of course, the Japanese yen continues to move sideways. And of course, with the dollar moving higher, we're keeping an eye on copper, which continues its descent lower. The 200 period moving average is trailing off, as well as all the other moving averages. Unleaded gasoline continues its move along with crude and the dollar moving higher, putting pressure on this commodity. Note the volume. Slow stow is in the green zone and MACD is below the zero line. So that's a short from this point on until we get back above the zero line. MACD gives us a cross at a minimum and slow stow turns back up. We need to see the dollar move lower. Gold has gone the same direction. We do see a little bit of buying interest on Friday. That could be just closing out short positions. Note where slow stow is turning up and MACD below the zero line. There's a very interesting article on gold and hedge funds if you want to check it out. Here's the address up above. A little bit lengthy, but if you just type in gold, hedge funds, and Google that, you'll get this at the top of the hit list. It goes on in the article to talk about the net gold positions that are net short. And we're at lows. So if for some reason we start to see a rally in gold and US dollar moves lower, we could see some short covering in this particular commodity. Silver also looks weak, nothing to see here. Down below this volume by price congestion area, which is now resistance overhead. And of course crude, which broke down out of this small channel sideways action and looks to be testing these previous lows that we saw back in March. Very interesting that this broke down the way it did. But the dollar is stronger, so a commodity based in the US dollar will see weakness as the US dollar rallies. So if you're thinking long crude oil, you need to see the dollar reverse and start moving lower. We'll round out this analysis with bonds. TLT, we've had a position for over 2 weeks now. We saw this price action that held off of this lower trend line as a possible bullish move. Then prices got above this volume by price bar, and we saw the 10 EMA cross back above the 50. Price action assumed a bullish direction, and now we're looking at the 200 period moving average overhead, as we previously mentioned, as our location to start to scale out. We'll watch what happens at this area. It could be that we continue to move higher. If that happens, we're probably going to see a corresponding move lower in the indices. Slow stow is in the red zone and MACD is moving above the zero line. So TLT looks pretty good on a daily basis. Let's take a look at the weekly, which shows some very nice bullish action. Remember last week and the week before we talked about these volume by price support zone levels, that if we got back above we could see a quick escalation in prices as they accelerate through the 50 period on the weekly chart, and then we have this descending wedge, the upper trend line, to deal with at 122.50. MACD is moving higher. Note histogram is really starting to boogie, and we have slow stow a ways off of the red zone, so we could see the daily embed and the weekly continue to move higher as prices look very bullish at this point. And of course junk bonds continue to show weakness as traders are getting out of the junky yield bonds. We highlighted this reverse Kirby several weeks ago going into the end of June. We lost it once, we got back above and then retested. We thought that we would see this upper trend line test as a failure, and that's exactly what happened on Friday of the previous week. Note the volume, where slow stow is in the green zone, but MACD is below the zero line in both cases. Okay, let's take a look at the IBD50. These are ranked by the top 10 earnings percent change over the last quarter. We have a number of IBD50 stocks that are reporting this week. Just keep that in mind. Facebook is high on the list, Vasco Data Security, United Therapeutics, and of course we'll have to keep an eye on Edwards Life Sciences, which moved higher, Taser, and some of the others scheduled for announcing earnings: Ellie Mae, O'Reilly Automotive, Carter's, and Gilead. So let's take a look at those. Okay, Alaska Airlines continues to move sideways in this flag pattern above the 10-period EMA, above the volume by price bars. Remember, we're watching if the US dollar continues to move higher and oil lower, then we should see higher prices on these airlines. Watch for a bounce here at the 50 level, otherwise it could get down to the 20 level and set up again. MACD is above the zero line and above its signal line. Allergan, we had a nice trade for a few days a couple of weeks ago. We had a big red bar on Friday. Note the volume by price levels. Watch for buyers at the 50-period moving average and slow stow to get oversold and turn back up. MACD is above the zero line but is crossing below its zero line, its signal line. Ambarella was a nice trade over the last 2 weeks. Recall that we were looking at the 50-period moving average to hold as support as well as these lows. That happened. Price got above the 10-period EMA. Then we got a slow stow 10E MACD setup, which turned higher. MACD got back above its zero line, and we had a nice move back up to the recent highs. We're looking for a flag or at least a pullback to the 120 area and the 10 EMA for a move higher on Ambarella. Bank of the Ozarks, remember we've been watching this one for a few weeks now. After earnings, at the 50-period moving average, down below this volume by price bar, looks more like a short to me. If it drops further into this level, watch where slow stow is headed and MACD is back below its zero line. Cal-Maine Foods is back on the list again. Note the descending channel. We could see prices get back down to the 49 level at this lower trend line. Note the reverse Kirby and MACD moving sideways. So not much to look at on this new addition to the IBD50. Carter's with earnings this week, pretty fairly priced at recent highs, triple top, slow stow near overbought, and MACD above its zero line. Earnings are this week. Celgene, if you're still in it, keep an eye on the sectors, XBI, and the remaining 9 of 12 that we saw were overbought could turn lower. Just keep an eye on that if you're still in Celgene. CNC, Centene Corp, watch this level here. The 130 is right below. Watch for buyers. Note the reverse Kirby. This all could play together with the spiders and the Nasdaq if we see weakness in healthcare, XLV, the sectors. All of this could play together for further weakness on the indices. So we want to see this bounce, hopefully this week, to capitalize on our calls that we bought at right around 3 o'clock on Friday for a long move over the next couple of days this week. Cirrus Logic, I believe, had earnings last week on Thursday. Nice gap up. Actually, I think it was Wednesday after hours. We're watching this inside day. Pretty big red candle, and slow stow and MACD headed higher. Criterio had a nice run, CRTO, 2 red candles Thursday, Friday. Watch the 10 EMA this week. Hopefully we get a bounce. Otherwise, this might continue to move lower. CyberArk looking pretty good. Testing the 50-period moving average. Could get back above these volume by price bars. Just keep an eye on Vasco Data Security as it reports this week. It could move cyber as well in sympathy. MACD getting back above the zero line. We still need the 1226 to resume as well. Edwards Life Sciences reports this week as well. At highs, couple of red candles on Thursday, Friday. 10 EMA just below. We want to see a bounce higher. Hopefully they have good earnings. Note stow and MACD turning. Ellie Mae continues to look strong. ELLI grinding higher between the upper Bollinger Band and the rising 10 EMA. Note the inclination on all of these moving averages, nearly a straight line. Stow's turning back up, MACD above the signal line. So this one's looking pretty good going into the week. Probably one of the better setups if it continues to perform. EPAM moving sideways at the 20 period moving average, 50 right below. That would be a good setup if we get down to 72. And slow stow, get oversold and turn back up. We'd have a 10E stow MACD setup for EPAM. Facebook, we may take a option play on Facebook as a gamble, not as a trade, with earnings this week. Starting to flag out here. So we'll keep an eye on Facebook and we'll let you know what we're thinking later in the week. Foot Locker moving sideways. Nice cyclical stock. Stow at the 50 area and MACD above the zero line. We just need to see these turn back up above their signal line for a 10E Stow MACD setup. Gray Television starting to set up again. Note the buyers that stepped in at the 20. We could see further downside, but note the volume by price bar. Some selling volume. Slow stow could get reset again, and MACD could turn back up. Watch the histogram and MACD to get back above its zero line for a 10E stow MACD setup. Horizon Pharma, HCMP looking very similar. Holding the 10 period EMA. Slow stow headed towards a reset at 20. Could bounce before then. MACD above the zero line. Let's watch for a turn on MACD and get back above its zero line. Lynette looking a little weak. Healthcare, pharmaceuticals, LCI right near these lows and the lower Bollinger Band. Note the reverse Kirby. Slow stow is in the green zone and MACD is trying to stay above the zero line. Keep an eye on that one this week. Manhattan Associates has been pretty strong. MANH. Note the 10 EMA. Prices could come back there first. Slow stow reset. MACD stay above its signal line. Monster Beverage continues its ascent at the breakout level, and note that it jumped into the Kirby level up above volume by price. There's no overhead volume now, overhead supply. Slow stow is in the red zone, MACD above its signal line and the zero line, so we'll keep an eye on Monster this week as well in time for the 10 EMA to catch up. Outer wall, we're watching for confirmation that the 20 MA held, and we saw buyers step in the end of the day on Friday. Price gets back above the 10 EMA. This could set up again. Slow stow get down below 20 and turn. MACD stay above the zero line and turn back above its signal line. Could be a nice setup this week. Papa John's, nice little descending channel pattern. Note the narrow Bollinger Bands up above this breakout level and the volume by price, which is much further lower at 64. Slow stow has reset. We're watching for a turn higher and MACD to stay above its zero line and turn back up. Paycom looking fairly weak. Looks like it's headed for the 130 EMA down below. Slow stow headed lower and MACD turning and below its zero line as well. Ross Stores, note the relative strength. I forgot to mention on the previous stocks that the ones that are holding above the 10 period EMA and fairly tight price action, right at volume by price, holding the 10 period EMA, MACD and slow stow resetting again. This could show signs for a move higher. If the indices turn back up, these relative strength stocks should do better. SCI Service Corp is back on the list, moving sideways. Not much to look at, holding the 50 period moving average. Slow stow looks like it wants to reset and MACD is above the zero line. Starbucks, nice gap higher on Friday, closed lower right near 57.29. Note the volume, MACD above its zero line and above its signal line, watching for slow stow to give us a direction on Starbucks. Taser failed breakout last week, the previous week rather, moving lower, lost to 65. Bollinger Bands are starting to open up. Note this Kirby, it reports this week as well. Slow stow oversold and MACD below the zero line. TSS, new 2 weeks ago, looks good. Note the relative strength, flagged out on Friday towards the middle of the week, and then saw buyers step in on Friday and Thursday. Watching this one, slow stow reset, MACD above the zero line. Could be a nice setup this week on this relative strength name. UTHR reports this week as well. Note the 130 period EMA and this reverse Kirby. If we see weakness, investors give us a bad reading on this one, up in the air. So I wouldn't be in the stock presently. Just keep an eye on UTHR. Universal Health Services moving sideways. Valiant higher outside the upper Bollinger Bands. Basco Data Security reports this week at lows. And Visa back on the list. Gap up, close lower. We'll be watching this one this week as well. Western Alliance continues to move sideways to lower. ZebraTech sideways. So that's it for the IBD50. Just keep an eye on the blog. We'll post some charts, markups, and some other possible trades going into Monday trading.